Good morning, everyone. Okay, let's get started. So, just a quick recap. We are dealing with the halachic. At this stage, there is a huge amount, as we know, a huge amount to say on this topic, and we'll try and focus on the bits that are important. We are still focusing on the halachic permissibility of engaging in what is known today as gender reassignment surgery. Okay? And what I want to do is, we've already looked last week at some of the major halachic issues as they present themselves, ranging from castration, for a male certainly, for a female also potentially, lo yilbash, lo silbash, ma'uch v'kosus, nosuk v'chorus, that creating a situation whereby disqualifying a male certainly from marrying into Klal Yisrael, potentially through the surgery. What have I missed out? I mean, that's kind of enough, right? In other words, there is no question that just the surgery itself, irrespective of whether halachically, and we still have to spend some time discussing this, irrespective of whether halachically the surgery is deemed to be effective from a halachic perspective, such that one's gender is considered to be changed. That's a whole separate vayidaber, which we're going to have to spend some time on. Yeah? But even assuming that it achieves the desired purpose from a halachic perspective, doesn't necessarily mean that it is mutter to do so. You know, the ends do not justify the means. Sorry. I don't know why that sounds better in a German accent. Yeah. But no comment. Okay. But you know what I mean. Right. So, searching around and for a good summary of the halachic discussion on the permissibility of shinui min, or the endeavor to try to change one's gender, this was a good paper I came across which summarizes. Not bad. It's not bad. Not everything here is gospel, but it's a good way of doing it. So you've got it up on the screen behind you. I've sent it to you by WhatsApp. You may have it on your tablet or whatever. I'm going to read it off my tablet here because we have problems with the printer. So, leaving aside for the moment, I'll send you a paper on this another time. I have a book here, by the way, which I bought recently. Gender, what everyone wants to know, Oxford University Press. I believe it's very important to not just to do what Lord Sachs used to call narrow casting, or speaking in the echo chamber. You know, Google today self-selects. It realizes from your choices that you are conservative or a liberal, and it will automatically feed you the stuff that it thinks you want to hear, because then it's more likely. It has this algorithm. We need to know this. You need to be conscious of it. So if it has identified you per your choices as a conservative, you'll constantly, be getting stuff from Fox News, and you'll be saying, "Hey, I must be right. All the news sites seem to agree with me," which is, at the very least, you need to be aware of it. So what I tend to do is to challenge myself by reading things that I am uncomfortable with. So I try to buy the books from the few, forgive me, thoughtful liberals that are out there. So I'll buy stuff from Noam Chomsky or Pinker or whoever to try and challenge myself, because you do need to be, it is important. You have to be able to justify your own positions. You have to be able to hold your positions. Okay, and this is actually a book by, it doesn't matter, whatever. We'll come back to that. So why I was mentioning this was because at some point we are going to have to trace the history of the whole concept and the incidents through which it's become an issue. How come today in 2022, we still are just about, that for a rabbi, this is an issue, something you have to be knowledgeable about. 20 years ago, it would barely have entered on the periphery of your radar in your professional life. Today, it is something that you absolutely are going to have to engage with at some point, whether somebody can sit which side of the mechitza they can sit in, or whether they can have an aliyah l'Torah, or what do you do about a get, or And London Basin actually was one of the first ones in the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, or the 1970s. Diane Grossnas, Zechon Vroch has a tshuva about this. We will get to this. But, like I say, at the moment we're going to look and focus, for the moment, quite narrow, on the halachic permissibility aspect. So, we come here around Rav Waldenberg. The Tzitz Eliezer wrote 3 tshuvas on this topic. And they are... We should really look at them inside, and maybe we will do so. But, we could spend forever on this, and I don't want to do that. It's not at all clear by the time you're finished exactly what his stance is on some of these things. So this, like I said, this is a good summary. Let's go through this. Ha'iyuna hilchati. It's all in Ivrit, so stay with the program. If there's something that's not clear, let me know. Yeah. Ha'iyuna hilchati harishon nichtav b'shas shnas 1967. Upursam b'mizgeres kuntras she'osak b'birur v'libun ba'ayot rufuyot shonot. 28. What's the source here? Okay. We'll have to see what was this? Nosoa klali shel haperek shebemizgarto dona Rav Waldenberg b'shinui min oisek bebirur zahuto v'yichuso shel mushtal lev. So the context was actually about a somebody who has been donated a heart, right? Habayani donakan he mahu quote kviuto has zahutit. ומהוס היסייחסוסוי של האיש הזה לאחר שהושתל בקיר בו לב כזה, כלבת של אדם אחר. וממשיך לחייס בו. דהו הלב הוא מלך האיבורים, והחי חי כולו בתנועס ליבוי. This is a quote from Rav Waldenberg. This is the context. He was asked a question about somebody who had received a very kind donation of a heart, right? He was the recipient of a heart transplant. And now, what is his identity? His relationships, once he's been given a heart, because the heart is the Melech Ha'evarim, the king of, and is the organ with which we most clearly associate the perpetuation of physical living. Koloima, מבחינה הלכתית, מעסיקו יסי השאלה, אם משהו מזהותו של תרם עלי בברס למושתל. In other words, what he's really dealing with is, are there any aspects of the identity of the donor that somehow transfer together with the physical donation of the heart? Okay? Possibly, thus goes the question. He therefore gets some of the new dinim. This is the way he was asked the question. Maybe some of the familial relationships transfer. If this is the essence of identity and who you are from a halachic perspective, does that now mean that he is somehow related to some of the people that biologically were the biological relations of the donor? So the fundamental approach and conceptual basis for Rav Waldenberg's approach is once the heart has been physically separated from the donor, from its original place where it lived and belonged, and it is then externally, mechanically manipulated to connect to the body of another person, it's ponim chadoshes. Umekabel shem leiv machmas gufay achodosh nischaberelo. It acquires the identity of heart is meaningful, says Rav Waldenberg, within the context of beating within the chest of a living person. And therefore it becomes subsumed by, secondary to the identity, the identity of the person in whose chest it now beats. Okay? And therefore it is connected to, and in terms of halachic identity, relevant only to the guf of the person in whom it currently beats. Okay? Relevant to this week's parasha, actually, last week's parasha. Surrogacy, there's another topic for us to deal with at some point, yes? A fetus that is conceived in one womb, or of genetic material, the ovum of one woman, and is carried and given birth by another, the host mother, so-called host mother, yeah? Or surrogacy, whatever word you want to call it. He says this also forms the basis, just to throw it out here, have a look at the Meshech Chochmah, based on the nace of Dinah and Yosef miraculously changing, as possibly being one of the first sources for this concept of a child being conceived in one womb and miraculously transferring to the other, Meshech Chochmah, etc. Fine. So this forms also the basis of Rav Waldenberg's stance and approach, also insofar as determining motherhood. Shelefiha hachomer hagineti hamushtal bekirba shel ha'em hayoledes. The genetic, what's the exact thing? The genetic material which is inside the mother who gives birth, whether we're talking about bitziot or afaklei ha'ilada atzma, mizbatel uma'abed es zahuso, it loses any original mitochondrial DNA. Another topic which we should look at some point, yes? Which is the genetic material from the ovum of the mother, right? It loses its status. It becomes secondary. It becomes bottle. It becomes, once it is nurtured and nourished, and in the body of the host mother, then that is the mother. Okay? Note 32 is interesting, but we're going to... surrogacy is not our topic today, so we'll keep going. Okay? So far, so good. So he has one basic fundamental halachic principle with which he operates and applies to all of these related halachic questions. B'mizgeret hadiyun b'dvar hashinui hamahuti she'oiva mushtal alei v'shel zehusai hachadasha dan harav Waldenberg b'shinui mahutim noisofim k'mo shinui min. So within that context, he also addresses himself to the theoretical problem or question, issue of somebody changing their gender. Kidvarov. And here we have a quote. Mechkar godol yesh omnom lachkar behecha shemischolel shinoi mahuti organi begufo shel adam kagoyim benishapach mizochel lekeva oy lehepach. Similar question. There is a lot of research one could ask in the situation where somebody changes their gender. Ukefi sheshomati, as I have heard, v'gam nisparsim al kach b'katavei shonim, and as has been publicized by various contemporary periodicals, mivtzaim b'hayom gam nituchim ke'ela b'mikrim miyuchadim u'kumuvan nadirim, that of course a very unusual, a tiny minority, but it seems that there are some surgical procedures that one could theoretically carry out, so he has been told. Again, I'd have to look at the date of this, but it looks like he said the date of this was 1967. Right, 1967. The first, I think, operation was performed in the 1930s. We'll get later, 1931, I think it was. In Germany. Correct, and that became a famous film. The Danish Girl. Okay, so I have been told. Okay, Right, so he says within this context, given that he has been told that potentially there is such a thing as a surgical procedure to change one's gender, then with this sort of change, it creates multiple issues which will be relevant to the determining of the personal identity of such a person. That's a very open sort of, this is Tzitz Eliezer, Chelek Yud, Siman Chafei, Chavav, Amud Kuf Samach Zayin. Fine. Now, Kedei lahachriya. So he opens up within this context of saying this is going to generate a lot of controversy, not at all simple. Kedei lahachriya madina shel adam mischelel begufay shini kizeh mahuti k'mo ma'avar migdari mitzatit Rav Waldenberg ba'arichos. So then, in order to try and come to some sort of consensus as to what actually would be the situation were somebody to undergo such a gender reassignment surgery. Rabbi Waldenberg quotes, Ba'arichas has Tshuvos shel Rav Yosef Palagi, Izmir, 19th century. We looked at this already, if you remember. But Mikre Hamuva B'Tshuvos Palagi Nishala, the question was asked whether a woman that is an Eshes Ish, a woman who is a married woman, this is the question that was asked to Rav Yosef Palagi, that a married woman who changed, quote, Minakeva lezochar bakoil mikoil koil. Right? Somebody who was changed from a female to a male in totality. And here you've got some, you've got a lot of technical, can you see note 35? Go down. Just by the way, you don't do it now, but I've sent it to you. You can look at it another time. Look at note 35. Just to show you, this is actually, this is an academic paper. You have to understand, this is not a sefer. This is an academic paper. And there are some advantages in the world of academia where things are approached, swings and roundabouts, as we say, advantages and disadvantages. Perhaps one of the advantages is, when it's done properly, is here you have a very technical discussion between a professor of endocrinology from the Beit HaCholim Hadassah in Karen to try and identify what is the reality that Rav Falaji is referring to. Do this in your own time, but because we're short of time, okay? Mm-hmm. But, so the question that was asked of Rav Falaji is, in such a scenario, a married woman, does she need, onto the next page, Tzricha get mi ba'ala? Does she require a get from her husband? If we're going to say that she's no longer a woman, she's now a man, maybe there's a different din. And a man doesn't need a get. A man cannot receive a get.
So she just disappeared.
Well, that's exactly the shayla.
She did not die, but she...
That is a very good question.
Yeah.
That is a very good question. And by the way, I don't want to complicate your life, but there is an interesting shayla, which is mentioned in a number of the poskim. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman has a simon on this, and there's lots of halachic literature on this. Eliyahu Hanovi, right? He went up Bisara Hashamayma. What happened to his wife? Halachically. Im Eishes Eliyahu Muteres. I'm just throwing it out there. He's not here, but he didn't die. So there is some precedent, albeit in a totally different context. Halach has to deal with this as well. Yeah? Okay, let's move on. So this is the B'milim Acherot. Hasheilah hi im asher tokaf mibchina hilchatit. So what Rav Falaji is dealing with, note, very important to note, he is not dealing with whether this procedure, this phenomenon, if it was indeed a mechanical one, was allowed or permissible. The shaila is, it's happened. Now what? Bidvar kever Rav Falaji bofen chad mashma'i sheho isha shehovcha legever. Rav Falaji decides unequivocally that a woman who changes to a man does not need a get, because now this person is a male and there is no woman here, and therefore the kiddushin, end of the paragraph, the kiddushin automatically just fly away, theoretically, because there's nobody here. There ain't nobody home. We don't have a woman here. There ain't nobody home. There's no woman. Yeah. Okay. You have to see this, and this is really important whenever you're learning. You have to look at whatever it is you're learning, especially when it's something which relates to phenomena, such as a medical understanding of the day. Again, and this is without going into the whole separate halachic or hashkafic discussion as to what extent the Rishonim or the others were aware of things and based the halachic decisions on phenomena which may or may not, in some cases, have not been in consonance with the known scientific or medical realities of the day, and whether it changes anything. That's a whole separate topic for another time, which we possibly should do. Right? Moshe Meiselman's book, Torah, Chazal, and Science, and Rav Dessler, there's a lot of stuff about that. But one thing is for sure, we need to understand that a tshuva that was written in the 19th century in Izmir, what was it referring to? I just need to know, what was he referring to? Right. So therefore, in order to do that, we need to have an understanding of the context within which he wrote the Tshuva. What was he talking about? כדי להבין את תשובתו של פלאג'י, יש לעשות על דעת לתפיסת הרפואי שרווחו במאה ה-19, בנוגע להבנת גוף האדם החלוקה לגברי נשי. Right? תומאס לקה, הבריחים בסיום של הספציה לצורך של מושג המין, טוען כי הרעיון של שני מינים מגודם זה לזה רעיון חודש יחסית שייך להתפתח רק לקריס. Okay. He's going to Galinos and all this sort of stuff. Okay. I'm not sure how much of this we're going to it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. Go to the next page. Epiphenomenon. Oh my word. Gender was primary or real. Okay, but we want to go further to the. Here we go. Go to the bottom of page 13. So there's a concept here of the difference between gender and sex and the way it was viewed in those days. We may come back to this, but there was potentiality that was viewed that one could theoretically be another. Okay, but let's go on. So the bottom of page 13, this medical perspective, Rav Waldenberg brings the following. Again, we're just quoting what he's bringing. What's this, 42? Sitz Eliezer there. He brings the following. As kirbezem asher isi b'sefer zikaron brisla rishonim l'Rabbeinu Yaakov HaGozer. De b'toich harichus dvarav b'sipuri mikra b'inyan tumtum van dregnet so shashinu abriya maybe mashemotza kosov b'sefer shut yad ne'emon Saloniki Tov Kuf Samach Dalad. That would be, do a quick 1804 to 1803. Okay, fine. It says it down there. Source 41. שראה לאחד מקדשי חכמי ירושלים שכוס הקונטרס שלו בכתב יד שמעתיק ומספר ממקרים כאלה שספחס נקבל את הזוכה. He quotes a periodical or a Shalos Utrulas that talks about this phenomenon potentially of males becoming females and vice versa, and discusses recordings of such instances. V'gam masbis inyan, how is it possible? Eich she'ein moitzim shum shinui betchunas ha'ivori ha'zocha yesim in anakeva ele shezu evarem mi b'fnim v'zu evarem mi b'chutz. Umichiven shekein mistapach ha'kuntras v'holach ima isha hi chayavis b'milo p'tura u'poshet lei ממאמר הכוס ואורו, משמע דזוכר מעיקרה הוא דחי במילה נקבה מעיקרה נס זוכר לוי. So, ha'uvda, this is what's important, ha'uvda. Rav Waldenberg mitzatet deis eila, Rav Waldenberg is bringing opinions which would appear not to be in accord with what we know about scientific and medical reality, but it's what was believed at the time. And the fact that he quotes them might be understood to say that he went along with it. Umikol makom hein mechazkes es amidose shel laka b'dvar tfisa shadayin mekubeles b'reish tamei ha-19 b'dvar hamin ha'echad hanechlak l'zachar l'kevi b'teim l'mudis choy maguf. So, in other words, Rav Waldenberg may have ascribed a certain amount of credence to this, what we think today is an outdated way of looking at it. He may have done so, and this may have contributed in some way to his halachic stance, possibly. Mm-hmm. Again, that's not a comment as to whether Chas v'Shalom, we're not saying right or wrong, we're saying, what did he base this on? Im lachzer l'tshuvas shel Palagi, Rav Waldenberg omnam savo ki kama hasogas shuskol yedei chachosav hal hilchaseis ochein takafot. Ve'im zoysu mekabeles emdosei ha'kredis shelafiyah shelitzlatz l'achrim nir la'achar shinoi. Nevertheless, even though he quotes Rav Palagi says what? If this, Rav Palagi accepts, for whatever reason, he accepts that a man can change to a woman. Or rather, in this case, a woman can change to a man. Rav Waldenberg quotes him, and yet Rav Waldenberg, does he agree with him? Kobe, does he agree with him? Anybody?
Not yet.
What have we seen thus far from Rav Waldenberg? Would you say he agrees with Rav Palagi or not?
I mean,
It's quite simple, guys. Really just checking anybody's with me.
The part that if you...
What did Rav Falaji
when you
say?
say the new part of the goof goes to the new person, then it becomes the thing, whatever it is, because part of the goof which was there, so practically not possible.
So
if that's the reason.
So Rav Falaji is saying what? If he's accepting that a woman can change to becoming a man, and therefore no get is required. What is Rav Waldenberg saying?
How?
His general stance is, Sami, his general stance is that we look at what presents to us now and not what went before. He would appear to be going along with it so far. Right? What is Rav Waldenberg so far? What is his basic principle? His principle is take the heart surgery. Take the surrogacy. You look at who and what the person is now. Right. If there's a separate shaila whether I'm going to accept that this person is indeed no longer male or no longer female. Yeah, but assuming that you do say that so, the basic idea that we look at the reality that as it presents itself now, today, would be, that aspect would appear to be in line with what Rav Falaji is saying. Yeah. Let's look at it. You got to be with me, guys. Let's look at it again inside. Im lachzoi, where it says im lachzoi, yes? Im lachzoi l'tshuvot shel Falaji. Rav Waldenberg omnam savur ki kama hasogis shutzkol ha'choisav ha'hilchatos achein takafot, that it could be that many of the objections, the halachic objections to Rav Falaji's psak might be valid. Im zois, nonetheless, hu mekabel es imdasoi ha'ikronit, but he accepts his fundamental postulate, his given, his axiom that what shelafiha yesh yisyaches la'adam kfi shu nira la'achar hashinui. We respond to man the person as he appears post whatever this change is. That is his fundamental concept. Okay. But his problem is another one. His problem is a different one. What is his problem? I am not convinced, says Rav Waldenberg, that this reassignment surgery indeed has actually managed to turn this person from a man to a woman or vice versa.
Even if you look at him after the procedure.
Correct.
Yeah.
So he hasn't spoken about the permissibility yet. At least we haven't seen this yet. All he has said is that when I am convinced that a change has definitely taken place, I look at what is now, what presents me now. This is true in the case of heart transplant. This is true in the case of surrogacy. And it may well be true if I was able to accept that halachically, post-gender reassignment surgery, that the person is now this other gender. But that is the big if.
So he can still agree with Rav Falaji and still hold that...
Possibly. Right. But argue with him and just say, but actually this surgery was not successful, if indeed it was surgery. This surgery was not successful from a halachic perspective. You with me? Right. This is important. Remember, we're analysing what's going on over here. וכן, אם יש להחל הסדר בפלאג'י גם על מקרה הפוך, מציע רב ולדנברג לדמס המקרה למקרה המובא בתרומת הדשן. So because of these doubts as to whether this reality has indeed changed the gender, because of those doubts, therefore, we're now moving forward. Matzia Rav Waldenberg, he suggests to compare it to a case brought in the Trumas Hadeshen. What is the case in the Trumas Hadeshen? Here we go. I mentioned it to you before. Shekoisev lachar al eshes Eliyahu hanovi zal, or eshes Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Im yicholim linosi leish acher. The Shaila brought in the Trumas Hadeshen, which I mentioned to you before. Mm-hmm. Right? Eliyahu Hanovi's wife. Eliyahu has gone. We are told he's still chai v'kayo, but he ain't here. That's for sure. He ain't here. So, does his wife need a get? Can she remarry? Well, what's the story? This goes back to the Trumas Hadeshen. Uposhit reishis de'eshes re'ehu osur v'loy eshes malach. The only thing that is osur is the wife of your fellow mortal being, but not the wife of a angel. Do you know why? Because it's not you're not an angel. I'm not an angel. It's eshes re'ehu is osur, not eshes malach. V'loy eshes malach shekulei ruchni v'loy gufani. Okay. Trumas Hadeshen Psokim Siman Kuf Beis at the bottom there. Al pi ha'hezba muva b'hemshech dvarav eishes re'ehu balam ma'et eishes malach. The term in halacha, the posuk eishes re'ehu excludes an eishes malach. Ve'im kein b'mikra nida an eishes re'ehu asura v'le eishes isha. Therefore, similarly, you would have eishes re'ehu and not eishes isha. You can't have the wife of a woman. So if it's an isha, then now, even though initially there was kiddushin because this person was a man, right? And therefore he seems to say, given that, onto the next page, given that if this person presents as, and if they are considered to be a woman now, then I would say, Mimela, there's no kiddushin, because for the same reason that Trumas Hadeshen says, Eishes Eliyahu is mutter. If ubehemshach leman hoser sofek, and he continues and he says, in order for the removal of all doubt, he says umikivan shekeis. Since now the husband of this woman nehepach v'nehiyeh leisha has indeed changed their gender and has become a woman, v'lo tafse keis kedushin mimenu kori mimeno. Since that this person now, who is, quote unquote, who is a woman, and would be unable to be mekadosh anybody in Cain, mimelo nifko hakidushin hakodim ilein. Therefore, the kiddushin have automatically just gone away.
But therefore, you need to accept.
He does. So it seems. So he does correct. He seems to be accepting the reality that presents itself to us now as this person being a woman. And this teshuvah has been seized upon by those in the conservative movement, and those who are those who are inclined, possibly for halachic reasons or for societal reasons, to want to legitimize the. Let me just finish this, please. The sentence, very important sentence, if I may, and that is: this single teshuvah of Rav Waldenberg has been utilized, and I can show you by those in the conservative movement and in those to the left of the conservative movement. The whole approach to this thing would be very different anyway. But even those in the conservative movement who ostensibly, and there is a process of some sort by which they arrive at halachic conclusions, which endeavors to have some halachic basis. This is a godsend for them, and they absolutely do utilize this, because Rav Waldenberg absolutely had street cred, forgive me, in the Haredi, in the Orthodox world. He was a major posek, especially in medical matters. And given that this tshuva would appear to indicate that he accepted the reality of this person now presenting as a woman, such that the Kiddushin would have gone away, therefore they used this, they jumped upon this with great glee, and job done as far as they're concerned. Now, we need to do, sorry Gabby, I haven't forgotten, you come back to you 1 minute. We need to do two things. A, we need to look at the totality of Rav Waldenberg's writings and output on the matter. We've only seen one small bit, we're going to see some more. And secondly, even if this were to be his position, he nowhere here at least does he talk about the legitimacy and the halachic license of undergoing such a procedure. That would be a whole separate topic. And thirdly, even if he were, in the unlikely event, to grant license, and there is a tshuva from Reb Zilberstein where there is a proper suicidal ideation, where it might be mutter for pikuach nefesh to undergo such a thing. By the way, we'll come to that at a later point. And even if he would then, in such a situation, really stand, even if we were able to say definitively and conclusively, which is not that simple, as we will see from other tshuvas that he wrote, that this person has indeed successfully managed halachically to change their gender, it still would remain to be seen whether that is the majority, is the normative halachic opinion. Or maybe there are poskim who, or many poskim, that he may be a das yochid, as we will probably discover. Okay, so it's important to see this whole big picture. Yes, Gabby.
Right, I was wondering, here at this point, he still holds with the if we assume the change.
No. He does. He does appear to. If you look at the tzitutim, look at the look at just look at the quote at the top of the page here. Umikiven sheka'es ba'alo shel zu nehepach v'nihiya leisha.
Umikeva.
He's accepting that as a reality.
Okay.
He does seem right. Am I right? Seems to be accepting that.
Okay.
Such that and he proves it. He says such that if this person would want to be not Masada Kiddushin. Sorry, would want to be Makadish another a woman. He takes as a priori, he says obviously they wouldn't be able to. So for that reason, any existing Kiddushin are said to be null and void.
Okay.
So this is, I think, we'll leave it here for today, but we've started really to dig under the surface of what's going on here. Okay? Shkayach.